Everyone knows what our children eat affects how they feel, but how can making healthier and more mindful choices help manage compulsive eating, binging and weight gain?
Well, this morning we're joined by senior counselling psychologist Dr. Omara Naseem, who's here to tell us more about how we can encourage children to develop healthy eating habits. Good morning to you. Really, really good to see you this morning. Really interesting. We were having a conversation earlier about the cost of living and how cheap food is often the most unhealthy. But there's another side to this coin, isn't there, Dr. Omara, where the cost of living and the stresses that people are under right now might lead to them actually craving junk food as comfort.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good point. And unfortunately, that tends to be what's cheaper and more affordable. So education around nutrition and what's good for the body and food and is really important. I think it's missing in a component of the curriculum in school as well for children and for parents. But yeah, binge eating and stress eating go hand in hand, definitely.
There's obviously a huge emotional attachment to food with a lot of people. So the environment.
The environment of the home, if it's stressful, can also lend itself to children wanting to emotionally eat or be, driven towards eating junk food as well because of stress. And it's marketed at children. It's marketed very well. Junk food high refined in sugar, food that's not so healthy for us. It really has an effect on our mental health and well-being, and actually on the function of the brain and the brain's ability to perform as well.
How can you recognise when a child, or anyone really, is emotionally eating?
So the parents are obviously in a great position. The more time you spend with your child, the more you're able to notice if they're being different in terms of their habits, if there's any secret eating going on, if you notice any sort of different behaviours at meal times, if you notice food's going missing. And it's really important to be able to approach your children gently about this issue and voice your concerns for them and noticing that they've changed in terms of their, behaviours, that you're concerned and curious about their well-being. Has anything going on for them that you don't know about? So try to have the conversation with them as soon as possible, as soon as you've noticed that they're having issues with food and your concerns for them. And maybe keep the conversation away from around food and weight appearance in general and more about their well-being and their moods.
I mean, there has to be a balance, right? You look at different cultures. For example, I grew up in a Greek family where for us it was all about if you're not eating everything on your plate and the second plate, something's wrong with you, and that's what we were told. What's wrong? They only ate 3 pieces of lamb and, they need another 10. And that's how it was for us. So then we grew up thinking, passing it down to our kids, I'm thinking, they're not eating enough, and facing the opposite problem. I mean, in your opinion, what does that mean? Because if you're taught one thing and now do you not think it's a balance? It's being able to sort of teach your children and talk to them about what's good but also not restrict them too much on everything, on the things that you think are not great or you think are too bad for them?
No, of course, it's a really good point, Peter. It's, so our social well-being and our emotional health is tied to our culture, the culture we're brought up in, the culture we live in. So food is an important part of that, how we connect, how we celebrate, how we come together. And that's a really good point. Role modelling from the parents is super important. What they do is what the children will absorb, and that will become their values. And what they then do and take into adulthood is habits. So coming together and enjoying food and being taught how to do that in a healthy way. All food is good in moderation. It's about how we eat things. It's about creating balance. And that involves also eating things and being careful to label them just as treats, right? All food is good for us if we eat it in a balanced and moderated way. And it starts with what we teach our children. So culturally, of course, it's okay to eat, more at times than what we usually would. And that is also modeled to children how we do it, that's what they pick up on. So it's a really important point. It's not labeling things as good and bad. Like everything's good if we eat it in the right way, in the right manner.
That's so interesting that you shouldn't label foods as good or bad foods, because I know growing up I had a big Irish family, so similar to you, whereas if you don't eat everything, you're rude to your host if you don't finish all the food on your plate. So that's really interesting not to label it as good or bad, or food as a treat as well. And on that note, food as a treat, what are your thoughts on diet culture, and speaking about being on a diet or watching your weight as an adult in front of children? Does that have an impact on them and their relationship with food?
Yes, of course. So children see what you do and they absorb the language around food, they absorb the emotional environment around food as well. So if we're talking about being on diets or food being good or bad or missing dinner or counting calories, children will see that and model their behaviour on what you do and think that's quite normal. And actually, that we're not wanting to teach that to children. We want to teach them everything's okay in moderation. We want to balance eating. We want to eat enough of the right ingredients. There's key food groups, and if we omit any one of them, that really has a detrimental effect on their well-being, how their brain functions, and their mood, and it predisposes them to things like anxiety and depression. So it's really important to be careful around what we're teaching our children, attitudes towards food and the language around food.
Dr. Omara Naseem, really, really good to talk to you this morning. We could talk to you all morning, couldn't we? Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much.